Welcome to Business Playmakers, the podcast that meets with innovators, trailblazers, and leaders to learn about their experience and what success really means. Hosted by entrepreneur and leadership coach Kyle Gorman.
Business Playmakers is presented by the Employer Blueprint. Employer Blueprint is dedicated to management and leadership development through one-on-one coaching and group seminars. You can find free resources from Employer Blueprint through YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. And for more information, simply visit employerblueprint.com. This is your host, Kyle Gorman, and I'm excited to introduce you to today's business playmaker, Terry Brownson. Terry has an extensive resume spanning over multiple decades and has been everything from a director, executive director, vice president, executive vice president, chief operating officer, and finally, prior to retirement, served as the CEO of Wendell Foster's Campus for Developmental Disabilities. Terry's career has put him in both for-profit and nonprofit industries. He has served on multiple boards across the country and even within his local community. I've had the opportunity to get to know Terry over the last couple of years and consider him a friend and have learned a tremendous amount from him as it relates to business and in life. He's been married to his wife for more than 45 years, Miss Patty Brownson. They have 2 grown children. After he retired about 3 years ago, he just loves to fish, and as he calls it, piddle in the yard. But Terry stays very busy with his community service and his volunteer efforts, and actually has just taken on yet another career move where he's been asked to serve as an interim CEO for an organization while they search for their full-time permanent CEO. So I hope you really enjoyed today's episode. It was really a great time just sitting down and talking to Terry about his experience. Terry doesn't take life too seriously. He's got a wonderful sense of humor, but yet when he speaks, people listen because he knows what he's talking about. He knows how to command respect. So enjoy today's episode. Well, Terry, I want to thank you for coming on today on the episode of Business Playmakers. I'm honored to have you on. I know you've got some tremendous experience, and I think a lot of that experience, a lot of our listeners are going to be able to relate to. So let's walk through kind of what your professional experience looks like. And I know you've had several years kind of for-profit, nonprofit, and different sectors, but kind of give us an overview of what your careers looked like.
Yeah, I guess, before I jump to professional experience, I guess that kind of leaves out some of the years I spent. I guess my first job was working as a janitor in a school, and I'd done that, and I shucked corn at Kroger's and spent summers working on the farm. And most unforgettable experience perhaps was when I got my taxi cab driver's license in Terre Haute. Right. So. But when I actually able to get into my kind of human services and health services field was just right after college. And first I worked as a social worker in a large state facility, state-operated facility, and then actually worked as a correctional officer in a federal correctional institution in Michigan. And then following grad school, I was able to be on the startup team of a facility that served people with developmental disabilities, and then continued working with the state before I kind of went into the nonprofit sector, operating a sheltered workshop for people with disabilities, and then actually spending some years with the United Way as their executive vice president. From that point, I actually went into the proprietary sector and spent 14 years with a company, working first of all, starting up a brand new program, and then leading startups in multiple states around the country, and saw that company grow from about a $14 million operation up to several hundred millions of dollars, and was actually with the company through the process of going public and selling stock on the public stock exchanges. And that. A lot involved in making that happen. Very much. That was quite an experience in and of itself, getting into that world in which quarterly evaluations and quarterly profit statements were more what it was all about, and to some degree a little bit less long term. Then I decided, though, I wanted to take that corporate experience back into the nonprofit world, and I was able to work with a national Lutheran social ministry that worked with people with disabilities. And I did that for a little bit over 10 years before, I started looking for other opportunities, and eventually ended up back in Owensboro as the CEO of Wendell Foster's campus. So most of my experience has been in the field of disabilities, but I had broader experiences in the overall realm of human services and correctional services and those kinds of things also.
Yeah. And one thing that I've always found really interesting is you have a child with developmental disabilities.
Yes, I do.
But now, in today's environment, you see people, in fact, we were just talking off air about you were at the University of Kentucky whenever they were first putting together a program specifically for social services.
Yes.
But so now there are people that just very specifically and intentionally go into those fields. But as you were coming through the ranks, typically the people that got into that field or into the helping individuals with disabilities were people that had children with disabilities. You actually kind of started in that direction before you had a child with developmental disabilities.
Yes.
And then got out of that and eventually went back. So what was it early on that you felt like called you in that direction?
Yes, I did actually start to work in the field of disability services before we realized that my son had disabilities. But I think it was just that general drive to do something meaningful in my life.
Yeah.
And when I started college, I was actually seeking a degree in civil engineering.
Okay.
Then I believe it was in my sophomore year, I took an elective in psychology. At the same time, I was taking physics and calculus. And one day I said, why is it that I'm loving this psychology stuff so much?
Yeah.
And it wasn't I couldn't do the physics and calculus, but it just wasn't turning me on.
Yeah.
So I think, there's a certain point in your life where you start saying, what do I really like?
Right.
As opposed to what do I feel like I've been prepared to do in my life.
Yeah.
And so I think that was I was lucky to have that feeling of that calling that perhaps working with people and in the social sciences was maybe where I was a better fit.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I think you're right. A lot of people get that calling at some point, or they get that feeling that this is maybe what I'm good at or skilled at, but this is what I really have an emotional connection to.
Yes.
And sometimes it doesn't happen to people who are well into their career. And you were fortunate enough to know that and connect with that early on, which is really good. It kind of allowed you to focus on that trajectory through the course of your career. So what kind of mentors have you had through the course of your career? And what was it about those people that you kind of looked to them for direction as you started building your career up?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I probably have to say that the first was my father, who was an accountant and a business manager type, which kind of gave me life in the other side of it for a while. I think what he instilled in me was this notion that there's honor in all work.
Yeah.
That you should never look down at someone because of what they're doing, because there's all kinds of work out there, and it all needs to be done somehow.
Right.
And it's got to be done by someone, and you should recognize and honor anyone who's out there trying to do a good job.
Yes.
And the other thing, somewhat related to that, was he instilled in me the idea that if it's worth doing, it's worth doing right.
Yeah.
And I remember that's something that's just stuck with me since I was probably a 6-year-old, was that thought. But then when I was in college, I worked for Kroger's, stocking shelves, shucking corn, running cash registers. But there I ran across an assistant manager by the name of Cecil McGuire, who worked with an overnight crew I was on. Yeah. And he probably taught me that you can have a lot of fun at work, so long as you know what's expected and you get out there and you do it right, and your final product has to be of quality. So I appreciated him teaching me that you can have fun at work without forgetting that you're there to deliver quality experiences for your customers. Then my last couple of years of school, though, I worked with a guy by the name of Dave Wilson, who was actually a chemical engineer turned entrepreneur, who operated a business called Acme Window Cleaning Company in Lexington, Kentucky. And besides cleaning windows on all the high rises and stuff, he also operated a janitorial service. But he hired me in to just kind of he was a startup. And he hired me in to be kind of his all-around office manager. Yeah. So I think probably he taught me the value of multitasking. Yeah. Because when I would come in, that's when he'd go out and check on his jobs and drum up new business, and that's where I also found some of the better jobs that might be coming down along the road, stripping some floors somewhere or doing work like that. It's just, I think, the whole notion of multitasking. And then on into my professional career, two gentlemen stand out. One was Dr. Bud Mitzos, who at the time was superintendent of Evansville State Hospital, and Mr. Jim Fernier, who was the head of the Breckenridge Job Corps Center. Okay. And these two guys were the two principals, along with some other investors, that actually created the Rest Care Corporation, which is now actually a multi-nation corporation. Oh, wow. Multi-billion-dollar operation now. But they started that company with the notion that we're going to build this business based on reputation. And if we provide great service, the word's going to get out, and we're going to be successful. So that was, I think that was another really good lesson from some mentors that kind of formed cornerstones of my professional life.
Yeah. Well, those are some good values, and certainly it's kind of nice that you can see that progression through the course of just learning the basic foundation principles and then kind of working your way from there. Well, I'm sure through the course of your career you've had some experiences that you kind of look back on as pinnacle moments that you would say where you felt like you really achieved something great, whatever that greatness would look like. But what could you maybe share as a big professional win that you have had?
That actually goes back many years, and I feel like I've had a lot of different wins, but being able to start from scratch, the first community-based services for Rest Care, and doing that in Southwest Indiana, and kind of leading that whole effort, starting from going out and trying to find a little office space and getting somebody to give me some credit so I could buy some office supplies. All the way up to getting that off the ground and fully functioning across Southwest Indiana, then to be replicated in multiple states around the country. So just that was a great experience in terms of a win professionally, was to learn what it took from the ground up of starting a component of a business that has really grown to be quite successful. Right. So I think that was a win that played on to, I think, a lot of future things I did in my career.
Yeah. Then that's got to be so neat just to be able to see just the basics of that, and then to be able to watch that build and grow, and then to be able to know now, like you say, I mean, multinational and to know what was involved in that in the early stages of office supplies. One of those things you kind of take for granted in the day-to-day business, but then day one you're trying to figure out, what do we do here?
Sometimes just wanting a paper clip. You can't really understand how much you need a paper clip.
Yeah, that's right. That's really neat. Well, something I've learned is that if you work for one day, you failed something. So through the course of your career, are there any moments that really stand out for you that you say, I should have done this one different. This is kind of a failing moment for me in my career.
Yes, I held a position for a very short period of time, actually, and I always prided myself in one of the other things my father taught me was that if you're going to move on to another job, know where you're going before you let go of what you got.
Yeah.
And the only time I violated that principle was when I did take a job with a company that I just really failed to really fully check out their corporate values. Mm-hmm. And that's not necessarily in saying there's something terribly wrong with those values, but in that failure, which was just basically my inability to get along with a couple of the family owners, I learned the importance, if you're going to be successful working with an organization, there's an alignment of personal and corporate values that go in that. And so it's important, before you throw your hat in the ring, and this was a job that I thought might lead to me being a CEO and a partner, in which I realized that there was just not a real long-term future in that because of just a disconnect in the alignment of what I personally felt was important and personal goals and what the corporate goals were of the organization. So I think that alignment of personal goals and corporate goals is an important thing to understand.
That's really interesting, and I've done a lot of research on that concept of company values and understanding, not only the mission and vision, which a lot of companies have, but what are the core values. And I think this is a trend we've really seen in the last decade or so of companies trying to formally define those. That wasn't always something that companies did, maybe 20, 30 years ago, but really more recently we continue to hear kind of the business experts talk about the need to do that. And I actually know of a company that, and it's interesting that we were talking about this because I was just talking to someone about this the other day, as they were discussing a candidate that really didn't match well with the company because of the values. And I had shared that I know of a company that actually they have their 5 or 7 kind of core values listed out, and in the interview process they will actually put that in front of a candidate and say, these are our core values on how we operate our business. We just want you to take a second to look at those and do you believe that you can fit into this? Yes. Does this match it? Is there anything in here that you aren't comfortable with that you say this maybe isn't me? And I think that's pretty progressive of a company these days to be willing to do that. But you're right, it's so important because if you get that personality that just doesn't fit with the core values of the company, no matter the skill set, they're never going to match up. I mean, it's just going to be, you're just going to have that opposing force all the time.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely,
that's really neat. So Terry, let's move into just sort of where you are now, and of course you retired. What was it, about
almost 3 years ago?
Almost 3 years ago. Wow. So you've had the opportunity to explore that stage of your career, which is I'm sure enjoyable. But as you look at where you are now, and then kind of as you looked at your career as a whole from a big picture perspective, how have you defined success for you?
It's success, I learned, is not really one thing, but it's rather, in my mind, it's an achievement of a series of personally meaningful goals over time. And the first of that is graduating from high school or college, or then doing what you have to do to get along until you land that first dream job.
Right.
Because very rarely do you come out of college and jump right into what you thought you were going to be doing right when you get out. And then finding, I think, the right life partner, finding, and having a family. and then of course improving your career and position to the point that you can provide a good life for your family. Those are the kinds of things that it's, like I said, it's kind of a series of personally meaningful goals that you set, feeling like you've done something meaningful in your life and that you've accomplished something and you've contributed something. Because, I think we all, when we pass away, the great hereafter, people are going to remember you through what you've accomplished in your life, those personally meaningful things, and you hope that's in some sort of positive way than just saying he was some self-serving jerk.
Right.
Right. And so I think that's, it's important to constantly be setting new goals in your life and new directions to go. Yeah.
And do you think, as you look back on your personal and professional life, that you have achieved success?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. When I was nearing retirement, I said, well, it looks like I'm going to be able to retire and buy a fishing boat and a truck. What more could a guy want?
Yeah.
And
you set that goal? And
that's right, and I made that. That. But once again, I think that goes back to how I've tried to define success in my life is meeting achievable goals. That does not mean you don't stretch those goals, but things that mean something to you, and you go out and get it.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting, just kind of hearing you talk about the course that your career took. That, of course, you retired as the CEO of a very large nonprofit. Yeah. And as we talked earlier about success in your career and some things that you as a win, you talked about kind of early stages in your career when you had an opportunity in a position because you felt like that would lead you into a CEO position. So when you talk now about setting these personal goals, it sounds like that was a goal of yours for a long time, and you took steps in your career to get there. Now, you went back into the nonprofit world, but you still knew I've got the skill set, the ability, and desire to be in that CEO type role. And so that was apparently a goal that you had very early on, and were able to kind of move yourself in that direction.
Yeah, I think it starts off with learning your business. Yeah, knowing what it is you want to do in terms of the technical details. Yeah. And then, obviously, to move up in an organization, there are so many collateral skills. I mean, the organization may need an accountant, but just being an accountant doesn't mean you can run a business. That's right. And there's so many just different elements of a successful business. But you start off being the best at what you can be, and then start learning the collateral skills, the transferable skills, if you will, to be able to get your arms around the whole business. And then gradually, as you learn those, I often said, even though my degree was in social work, that one of the best courses I took for success was an accounting course. Yeah. Because having to learn the business nature of it. And I always felt that even in the nonprofit world where I ended up, that you, the only thing nice about the nonprofit world is that you're able to take the profits, which in the nonprofit world you call surpluses instead of profits, and you reinvest them back in that. But I also felt very strongly that nonprofits have to use good business principles. Yes. And that's the obligation you have to the public that supports you and contributes to you. You start by learning your business, and then you just keep growing the collateral skills needed to be successful on a broader and broader scale.
Yeah, yeah. Are there any keys to success that maybe you could share with others, that you would say things maybe that you just kind of kept in mind all along, that you would say, even as you had these personal goals out there, but some specific keys that you've had to achieving a level of success?
Yeah, I think you have to have a passion for what you're doing,
Yeah.
which to me relates also to enjoying
Yeah.
what you're doing.
Right.
That feeling that this is something you're kind of cut out to do, and kind of related to that is you got to keep a sense of humor about yourself, and about life. I mean, one of the things I've learned is that no one is so important that they're indispensable. Everybody is replaceable.
Yeah.
At least in the world of work and the world of business. I mean, you might not be irreplaceable to your family, but in the world of business, everybody's replaceable. So you got to have a sense of humor about yourself. As I mentioned before, focusing on results and meaningful outcomes. Knowing where you're going, not just working to be working and spinning your wheels, but to be going somewhere with that. Trying to stay flexible and creative. You see so many people get into a rut of what they're doing, and they just settle in. Well, gee, I'm 45. I'm going to do that the rest of my life, and I don't want to learn anything new. And that's no fun. I mean, the fun in it is constantly finding new ideas and creative ways to doing things. And I guess last, which I probably should have put first, was just keeping my faith. And accepting and believing that there's something bigger than me out there, and that I can go to that place to find strength when I need it.
Yeah, that's really good. That's so key and critical. I think sometimes just knowing and believing and recognizing that there's that it's not just all about me.
Yes.
That there's that this is all for a bigger reason, a bigger purpose. Sometimes helps people realize, it's time to suck it up, buttercup. There's other things you got to do here.
Exactly.
So that's really good.
There's more to life than just making that next dollar.
Than your little world that you're living in. So as we look forward a little bit, as I just mentioned, you retired 3 years ago. You actually just recently were asked to step back in as an interim CEO for a period of time during the search for the new full-time long-term CEO. But so what do the next 10 years look like for you? You've experienced retirement in your fishing boat and your truck, and now you're kind of stepping back for a brief moment into this business world. But what do the next 10 years look like for you, do you think?
As I'm just about approaching 70, I guess I have to say my career goal is to become a professional fisherman. I'm not sure that I'll make that, but I think you always have to be looking towards something. But other than that, I just look forward to having meaningful time with my family and sharing some of what my skills might be, in volunteer roles, and even taking on some volunteer roles in things that are in areas not familiar, to me. That's the beautiful thing of retirement, is that you're pretty much calling shots, as to how you're going to use your time. And it's much easier to say no thank you to some requests than when you really are trying to make a living for you and your family. So.
And along those same lines, this concept of retirement is different for everybody. And again, as we've talked about, you retired 3 years ago, and I know you spent a lot of that time volunteering and giving back. As you serve on several boards, and you give a lot back to the community, but I think at some point, I think at different points in people's career, the concept or kind of definition of retirement takes on different meanings. But so, what does real retirement look like for you?
Well, it's once again, pursuing meaningful goals that you set for yourself. It's spending time with family. It's being able to have enough financial security that you're not worried about your future, or the future of your family. And it's just actually a time to relax and look back on the blessings you've had in your life, and to appreciate that. I think, I have to believe that everybody has a purpose in the world, and whether that is the most severely disabled person you can find, or the most powerful person in the world, we all have our purposes, and I think even in retirement, we need to do that self-reflection to say, what's my role in the world right now? And it may be the greatest granddaddy, or or the greatest fisherman, or whatever.
Right.
It once again is just that opportunity, though, to continue to define that.
Right. And so I certainly don't want people listening to get the wrong impression. And again, retirement for 3 years, but I don't know how busy you were in your career. I know you've been very busy in your retirement. I've had the privilege of serving on a board with you, and just seeing your engagement in the community and other things that you serve on. And I know your retirement has been very busy. So the idea for you of sitting 8 hours a day in a fishing boat and not talking to anybody really has not been the reality that you've been able to experience. But
that's true. I once had someone tell me that when you get older, you're actually just like you always were, only more so.
Yeah.
And so as much as I think people would like to think that they're just going to sit back in the rocking chair and drink beer, or watch television or whatever, if that wasn't what you were in life, that's probably not what you're going to be in retirement.
Yeah. That's a really neat way to think about it. I've never heard it that way, but that makes a lot of sense once you get that kind of sense of freedom, that you're probably going to just go to who you at the core really are.
Who you are.
That's really neat.
That's right.
So Terry, what would you do if you won $1 million?
Well,
maybe a nicer fishing boat.
Maybe, yeah. And I don't know. It might be nice to invest in just a little cabin on the lake or something like that.
Yeah.
But actually, I'd probably try to figure out some good tax-advantaged way to give most of it away. And that just gets back to being able to have enough success in your life and to have it thought out what you needed in retirement. And I think that's a really important thing, to be satisfied, so that you're not really worried about, gee, I better go buy another lottery ticket. And so I really think that one of the joys of winning $1 million would be to figure out some great way to give most of it away.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Yes, it would.
That would be neat.
Yeah.
I'm sure you'd have plenty of people knocking on your door giving you ideas of how to get
Absolutely.
away. But to be able to think creatively about that.
Yeah.
One of the things that I really like to do in this forum is talk about how we can help others and kind of just provide advice and suggestions and ideas. So as we look in that direction, what kind of characteristics would you be able to define for maybe your favorite boss that you've had over time? What are some characteristics that you think this is what I'm looking for when I'm working for someone?
Yeah, I really think, I most like to work with people who enjoy their work, who appreciate their work, whether they're my boss or whether they're people working for me. People that are genuinely thankful and happy that they have a position, and that they have meaningful work, because I think people like that are contagious to be around. People that are friendly and happy, but can also be extremely serious when that's it. But it's all because they understand the importance of what they're doing, or the goals on what they're doing. So I think those are the kinds of people I like to be work with and have worked for. Those that are truly engaged in it, but also enjoy what they're doing.
Right. What about any type of personality traits you've seen of people that you just don't enjoy working with or working for?
Yeah, I think probably the most frustrating people to work with, I would rather work with a person who is frustrated or angry than one who is apathetic. Because if someone's frustrated or angry with what they're doing, they're showing some passion about it.
Right.
At least they care about their situation.
Yeah.
And usually if somebody cares, you can work with them or work with the situation and come bring about improvement. But apathy, I just haven't found the secret to overcoming someone who's apathetic about their job. And I think related to that is people who take responsibility for, who feel accountable for their own happiness and their own success.
Yeah.
It's very frustrating to work with someone who seems to think it's somebody else's job or someone else's responsibility to make them happy or successful.
Yeah.
It really is up to you to decide if you're going to go out and be successful and do something.
Yeah, yeah, and you can decide that no matter what you're working on. You know, you mentioned earlier at 6 years old, kind of a character value that your dad had passed on. If it's worth doing, it's worth doing well. It's worth doing right, and that's a trait that is easily transferred into adults in the professional career. The same thing that. If you're going to do it, do it right. If it's not something you want to do, go find something you do want to do. But while you're in this moment doing this task, do it to its full potential.
And I really feel sorry when you are working with someone and you recognized that no one ever mentored that in them.
Yeah.
No one ever told them that, or they felt it.
Yeah.
And you can try to offer that. But once again, it comes back to personal responsibility. And if someone really wants to make something out of their life, that's something about learning about yourself.
Yeah.
That, gee, that was just not the way I was raised, or I did not have that kind of mentorship when I was young.
Right.
But my gosh, I look around people that I want to be like.
Yeah.
And that's what they're showing or telling me, and maybe I ought to pay attention to that.
Yeah, very good. Do you have any books or authors that you might be able to recommend to other people out there?
Well, there's always new good books out there.
Yeah, every year.
And it's amazing, though, the more you read, the more you start seeing repeats or rehashing or putting new words to old concepts and stuff like that. So even in looking at newer ones, I always kind of go back to the classics like, Covey's, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Boy, the old ones. But like, Tom Peters and Waterman's In Search of Excellence. To me, that just really had a major kind of influence on me. Of course, your old-time favorites, The Little Engine That Could. I think every parent ought to be reading that to their kid.
Yeah.
There is just, boy, you talk about setting the foundation.
That's true.
The Little Engine That Could. Yeah. And then I guess one of the books that really kind of hit me from back in the Middle Ages, and it may be out of print now, was called Leadership Secrets of Attila the Hun. And it was by a guy by the name of Wes Roberts. And really, it was kind of a mixture of history and sage management advice, looking at how Attila took this ragtag group of uneducated, uncouth guys and turned them into one of the most effective and one of the fiercest fighting forces of all time. And it was amazing, even looking at, good leadership has been around for a long time. And you can just go all the way back to the earliest printed books, and the earliest stories, and it abounds of people who had good insights and good empathy and good understanding, and took responsibility for their lives and led people forward. It
is always interesting to I read a lot of leadership and management and business books, and it's always it's amazing how often they simply are referencing another book that's just 10 or 20 years older, and I actually just finished a book recently where they I think through the course of the book they mentioned about 10 different books and authors, and I've read all of the other books that they referenced, and they just kind of took all of those things and either kind of went an extra layer or just explained it differently or said, okay, now here's how to implement this concept. But I sometimes just believe there's nothing new. It's just another way to explain the same old concept.
And I think you've learned this, and I think most people will learn this, that there's no one formula that works for everyone.
Right. Everyone all the time. Yeah.
And that's why a person has to find styles and techniques and approaches that strike a chord with them,
right.
And they think, now I could do that.
Right.
And then go out and try it and see if it fits. Mm-hmm. And if it doesn't produce results, get back out and look for something else and see what works for you, because it ultimately has to work for you. And I think we've all faced people, and I think perhaps salesmen may be the most example, where you say, my guy, this guy just left his Salesman 101 class, and he's just walking through the list of sales techniques that he doesn't understand or attach himself to this any more than he does the man in the moon. And it's so you really have to find what works for you. I think.
That's really good. That's great advice. So do you have any other advice before we close out here? Any advice you might be able to give to other people out there that are striving for some level of success?
Well, probably the first thing is to show up.
Yeah.
You can't be there one day and then whether you're physically there or you have to be mentally there. When you head into work, or whether in your personal life with your family, show up. Be engaged. Be there in the moment. With your people. And then, I've talked about setting meaningful goals and the importance of keeping your eye on the prize, and don't get too distracted by everyday kinds of challenges. Keep stuff in perspective, and it goes back to the old most people have seen it, the old structure where you take a task and you say, is this important and urgent, or important but not urgent, and break down tasks in those things and try to prioritize. And guys, get to know your constituencies, whoever they are, whether they be patients, whether they be customers, whether they be whoever you're working with, whoever your constituencies are. Get to know them well and appreciate them. Because they are the keys to your success. And your success will depend on that. And of course, finally, and you lose track of this off and on in your life, and you just have to keep coming back to it to keep God and family first, because that's all that's going to be there when everything else is, whenever you fail, certainly, and you will fail during your life. But also when you're old and washed out, God and family is what's left. And don't ever forget that, and keep focused on that.
That's great. That is excellent advice, Terry. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. A lot of great information. I hope people can appreciate it. I'll try to find that book, and I'll put a link to it in the show notes. So
we'll see if it's still being published.
We'll see if some others may be able to benefit from that. But I really do appreciate it. Thank you so much for being on today.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you for checking out today's Business Playmaker. Links to the resources discussed in today's episode are available in the show notes. For more information and resources from your host, you can visit him at www.kylegorman.com. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast for the latest episodes. And until next time, make it a great day.